The cold darkness of the Mariana Trench pressed against the reinforced windows of the deep-sea vessel. Dr. James Miller watched the depth meter tick past 35,000 feet, his eyes fixed on the murky abyss beyond the thick glass. The mission had started like any other deep-sea exploration, but something about today felt different. The readings they'd picked up 3 days ago were unlike anything he'd seen in his 15 years of marine archaeology. Approaching the anomaly, "Sir," the pilot said, his voice steady despite the crushing pressure surrounding their vessel. Sonar showing solid structure, much larger than initial readings suggested. Miller nodded, adjusting the settings on his monitoring equipment. The vessel's lights cut through the darkness, revealing glimpses of the seafloor below. What they'd discovered during their routine mapping expedition had brought them back with better equipment and a larger team. The structure they detected shouldn't exist at this depth. It defied everything they knew about ancient civilizations. "Hold position," Miller commanded as the first clear images appeared on their screens. The structure rose from the seafloor like a sleeping giant, its surface smooth and unmarked by the countless years it must have spent in the depths. "Begin surface mapping." The team worked in focused silence, their instruments scanning every inch of the mysterious structure. It wasn't metal, at least not any metal they could identify. The surface had a faint bluish tint that seemed to absorb their lights rather than reflect them. "Dr. Miller," called out Rebecca, one of the senior researchers, "you need to see these readings." Her voice carried an edge of excitement that made Miller turn immediately. "The material. It's not showing any signs of degradation. Nothing. Not even a single microorganism has attached to its surface." Miller moved to her station, studying the data streaming across her screen. She was right. In an environment where even stainless steel would corrode, this structure remained pristine. "How old did you say the initial dating suggested?" "That's just it," Rebecca replied, pulling up another set of readings. "According to every test we've run, this structure predates human civilization. By a lot." The implications of her words hung heavy in the cramped cabin. Miller returned to the main viewport, his mind racing. The structure below them wasn't just an archaeological find. It was something more. Something impossible. "Sir," the pilot's voice cut through his thoughts, "we're picking up some kind of energy signature from the structure." Miller rushed back to the main console. The readings were clear. A faint but steady pulse of energy emanating from deep within the structure. As they watched, patterns of light began to appear on its surface, ghostly blue lines tracing incomprehensible symbols across the ancient material. "Get me a secure line to surface command," Miller ordered, his heart pounding. "And start recording everything. Every single reading, every image. We're going to need it all." The next few hours passed in a blur of activity. More research vessels arrived, carrying teams of scientists from different fields. Military ships appeared on the surface above them, establishing a security perimeter around the site. The world's attention focused on this single point in the Pacific Ocean, as media outlets began broadcasting the first images of what they were calling the deep structure. Miller stood in the observation room of their research vessel, watching the teams of divers and remote vehicles swarm around their discovery. The structure had remained silent since its initial display of lights, but the energy signature continued, a steady pulse like a sleeping heartbeat. His secure phone buzzed. Another message from the International Scientific Committee that had been hastily assembled. They'd wanted him to lead the investigation, to coordinate the teams that would study this impossible find. Miller looked again at the structure, its smooth surface now illuminated by dozens of powerful lights. They'd come looking for remnants of ancient human civilizations, hoping to understand their own past. Instead, they'd found something that challenged everything they thought they knew about Earth's history. As Miller watched a team of divers disappear into a newly discovered opening in the structure's surface, he couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. This wasn't just a discovery that would change archaeology. It was a discovery that would change humanity. Whatever they'd found in the depths of Earth's deepest ocean, it was waiting for them. and after thousands of years in the darkness, it was finally ready to be found. 3 weeks had passed since the discovery, and the research facility built around the structure buzzed with constant activity. Dr. Miller stood next to Dr. Anna Thompson as she adjusted her quantum scanning equipment. The makeshift lab they'd built inside the structure felt different from the rest of the facility. Cooler, quieter, as if the very air held its breath. "These readings make no sense," Anna said, tapping her screen with growing frustration. "The energy patterns we're seeing, they don't follow any known laws of physics. It's like the structure is breathing, but instead of air, it's breathing time itself." Miller watched as she worked, her fingers dancing across the control panel. In the 3 weeks since she joined the project, Anna had become essential to understanding the structure's mysteries. While his team focused on the physical aspects and strange markings, her quantum physics background helped them grasp the impossible things happening within the structure's walls. "There," she pointed to a new reading. "See how the energy pulses sync with those markings on the wall. They're not just decorative. They're functional, like circuit boards, but operating on principles we've never seen before." Miller stepped closer to the wall, studying the faintly glowing patterns. They'd discovered similar markings throughout the structure, but these were different. They seemed to shift and change when viewed from different angles, like living things trapped beneath the surface. A low hum filled the air, so deep they felt it more than heard it. The markings on the wall began to pulse with a stronger light, their patterns moving faster. "James," Anna called out, her voice tense. "The energy readings are spiking. Whatever this is, it's active. Really active." Before Miller could respond, the wall in front of them seemed to liquefy, its surface rippling like water. The humming grew louder, and the temperature in the room dropped suddenly. Their equipment screens flickered and went dark, then lit up with streams of unknown symbols. "Everyone out," Miller shouted to the research team. But as they turned to leave, the entrance sealed itself, the same liquid metal effect transforming the doorway into a solid wall. The humming reached a peak, and then everything went silent. In the center of the room, the air itself began to twist and fold, forming patterns of light that slowly took shape. A figure emerged from the light, not solid but not quite holographic either, something in between. It spoke, its voice resonating not through the air, but directly in their minds. The language was unlike anything they'd ever heard, yet somehow they understood. "The awakening protocol has begun," the figure said. "After 50,000 years of sleep, the Nautilus rises again." As if responding to these words, the entire structure shuddered. The walls around them began to change, surfaces flowing and reshaping themselves. What they had thought was a simple research room transformed before their eyes into what was clearly a control center, with displays and interfaces emerging from the walls. "We placed the Nautilus here," the figure continued, "when your kind still hunted in caves. We waited for the day you would grow ready to understand, ready to take your place among the stars. That day has come sooner than expected." Miller and Anna stood transfixed as images appeared in the air around them. Star maps, technical diagrams, and things they couldn't begin to comprehend. The figure gestured, and a large display materialized, showing their planet from orbit. "Your Earth faces a threat you cannot yet see," it said. "The Nautilus is more than a ship. It is a key, a shield, and a bridge to your destiny. But time grows short." The room's transformation completed itself, and the sealed entrance reopened. Beyond it, they could see that the entire structure had changed, revealing corridors and chambers that hadn't existed before. The figure turned to Miller and Anna. "You have questions. Ask them. Learn quickly. The others will come soon, drawn by the Nautilus's awakening. Some will help, others will not. Your world must be ready." With those words, the figure faded, leaving them standing in what they now knew was the bridge of an ancient starship. Their discovery hadn't just changed archaeology or physics. It had changed everything. As emergency calls began pouring in from the surface about massive energy readings and unexplained phenomena worldwide, Miller and Anna shared a look. They both knew that humanity's next great journey was about to begin, ready or not. The emergency meeting room aboard the surface facility was packed with scientists, military officials, and government representatives from around the world. The air felt heavy with tension as Miller and Anna prepared to share what they'd learned. On the large screens behind them, data streamed in from the Nautilus, now fully awake and sending signals into deep space. The signal was received 20 minutes ago, Anna said, her voice steady despite her exhaustion. The response came from somewhere near the Orion Nebula, over 1,500 light-years away. But that's not the strange part. She paused, looking at Miller. The message arrived instantly. No delay, no light speed limit. The room erupted in whispers and hurried conversations. Miller stepped forward, raising his hand for quiet. There's more. The builders, the species that left the Nautilus here, they've sent us a complete message. We need you all to see this. He nodded to Anna, who activated the holographic system they'd brought up from the ship. The same figure that had appeared to them before materialized in the center of the room, but this time its message was different, more detailed. People of Earth, the figure began, its voice echoing in their minds. We are the builders, and we have waited long for this moment. Your world was once part of a vast network of civilizations, a network we helped create. But 50,000 years ago, we detected something approaching, a cosmic force that threatened all life in this sector of space. The hologram changed, showing a massive object moving through the stars, consuming everything in its path. We had two choices: try to fight it and risk everything, or hide those worlds with potential, giving them time to evolve and prepare. Earth was one of those worlds. Images flashed around them. Ancient Earth, pristine and untouched, being hidden behind some kind of cosmic veil. The Nautilus is not just a ship. It is one of our greatest achievements, a vessel capable of moving between dimensions, through time itself if necessary. We left it as your ark, your key to joining the greater community of civilizations. The room remained silent, every person present trying to grasp the magnitude of what they were hearing. The figure continued, but now the void approaches again. Our calculations show it will reach your solar system within 5 of your years. The Nautilus has awakened because time grows short. Miller watched the faces around him pale as the hologram showed their solar system, with a massive dark mass approaching from deep space. You are not alone, the figure reassured. Other worlds we seeded have survived, evolved, and now wait to welcome you. But you must prepare, you must learn, you must unite. The message continued with a series of technical instructions, star maps, and coordinates, information they would need for what was to come. As it ended, the figure looked directly at them, its eyes seeming to hold ancient wisdom. Your species has grown faster than we expected, achieved more than we hoped. Now you face your greatest test. The Nautilus will guide you, teach you, protect you. But the choice to leave, to save yourselves, must be yours. As the hologram faded, the room remained silent for several long moments. Finally, Admiral Hayes stood up, his face grim. How sure are we about this threat? Could this be some kind of trick? Anna stepped forward, pulling up new data on the screens. The ship's sensors are far more advanced than anything we have. They can detect things we never could. Look at these readings from the edge of our solar system. She pointed to strange distortions in space itself. Something is coming. Something big. Miller watched as the reality of their situation sank in. Humanity had always wondered if they were alone in the universe. Now they knew they weren't. But they also knew they were in danger. The Nautilus wasn't just a discovery, it was their lifeline. We need to begin preparations immediately, Miller said, breaking the silence. The ship is already teaching us how it works. It's like it's alive, adapting to help us understand. But we don't have much time. As the meeting erupted into urgent discussions about next steps, Miller caught Anna's eye. They both knew that everything was about to change. Humanity had just gotten a glimpse of its true heritage, but with it came the knowledge of an approaching doom. The race to save Earth had begun. 2 months into the preparation phase, the Nautilus had transformed the surrounding ocean into a massive construction site. Floating platforms housed thousands of scientists and workers from every nation, all working together under the newly formed Earth Defense Initiative. Miller watched from the ship's control room as another group of specialists arrived through the recently constructed underwater transport tubes. Anna stood at one of the ship's control interfaces, her hands moving through the holographic displays with growing confidence. The Nautilus had been teaching them, updating its systems to match their level of understanding, while gradually introducing more advanced concepts. What had seemed like magic 2 months ago was slowly beginning to make sense. "Look at this," she called to Miller, pulling up a new display. "The ship doesn't just bend space. It exists in multiple dimensions at once. That's why it seemed so small at first. Most of it was folded away in spaces we couldn't see." Miller nodded, watching as the display showed layers of the ship unfolding into dimensions their minds could barely grasp. The Nautilus was teaching them a new way of thinking, preparing them for what lay ahead. Every day brought new discoveries, new understanding, and new challenges. "Dr. Miller," a voice called from the doorway. Admiral Hayes entered, followed by Professor David Foster, their newly appointed ship captain. "We've got the first test results from the propulsion trials. You need to see this." They gathered around the central display as Hayes pulled up the data. The Nautilus had allowed them to test its smallest auxiliary craft, teaching them the basics of its dimensional drive technology. The results were beyond anything they had imagined. The test vessel covered the distance between Earth and Mars in under 3 minutes, Hayes said, his voice filled with awe. No acceleration effects on a crew, no relativistic issues, nothing. "It's like the space between just folded." "That's exactly what it did," Anna explained, pulling up the ship's educational diagrams. "The Nautilus doesn't move through space. It moves space itself. The builders found a way to manipulate the fabric of reality at a fundamental level." A soft chime interrupted them as new data flowed across the screens. The ship's deep space sensors had detected more movement from the approaching void. It was still years away, but its effects were already being felt at the edges of their solar system. "How are we doing on the evacuation preparations?" Miller asked, turning to Hayes. "Better than expected. The ship's matter replication technology is helping us create the resources we need. The bigger challenge is getting people to understand and accept what's coming." Hayes looked troubled. "There's still a lot of denial out there, despite all the evidence." Miller understood the problem. How do you convince billions of people that they need to leave their home planet? Even with all the proof, even with the Nautilus's incredible technology right in front of them, many refuse to believe. "Show them this," Anna said, activating another display. The ship had been recording the void's effects on other star systems in its path. The images were horrifying. Entire solar systems being twisted and torn apart by forces they still didn't fully understand. A sudden alert drew their attention. One of the training simulations had produced unexpected results. The Nautilus's AI had been running scenarios, testing human operators' responses to various situations. But this time, something was different. "The ship's teaching us something new," Anna said, studying the data. "It's not just about running away. Look at these defense protocols. The builders left us more than just an escape route. They left us a way to fight back." The room fell silent as they absorbed this new information. The Nautilus was more than just humanity's ark. It was a key to powers and technologies they had never dreamed possible. But time was their enemy. They had to learn, adapt, and prepare an entire species for a journey beyond anything in human history. Outside, the ocean's surface was now dotted with thousands of lights from the growing preparation facilities. Humanity was coming together in ways they never had before, united by a common threat and a common purpose. The Nautilus hummed softly around them, continuing its ancient mission, preparing its new crew for the challenges that lay ahead in the vast, dark ocean of space. The first signs appeared exactly as the Nautilus had predicted. Miller stood at the window of the orbital observation station, watching the strange purple auroras that now lit up Earth's poles every night. The void was still months away, but its influence was already reaching them, twisting the planet's magnetic field in ways their instruments could barely measure. The latest readings from Jupiter just came in, Anna said, her voice tight with concern, as she entered the observation room. The void's gravitational effects have already started disrupting the gas giant's atmosphere. The storms are getting worse. Miller turned from the window to look at the live feed from their deep space probes. Jupiter's famous red spot had grown dramatically, and new storms were forming across its surface. The massive planet was acting as their early warning system, showing them what was coming. "How long?" he asked, though he already knew the answer. "At the current rate of approach, 6 months, maybe less." Anna pulled up more data on the main screen. "The good news is that the Nautilus is ready. The bad news is that we're still arguing about what to do." The global debate had raged for weeks. Despite all the evidence, despite the changes they could now see in their own sky, many still refused to accept that evacuation was necessary. Some claimed they could fight the void from Earth. Others simply couldn't accept leaving their home planet. An alert sounded throughout the station. Another conference was starting in the main chamber. As they walked through the station's corridors, Miller and Anna passed dozens of screens showing news feeds from Earth. Cities around the world had erected massive viewing screens showing the approach of the void. Religious groups claimed it was the end times. Scientists argued about possibilities for defense. The conference room was packed with leaders from every major nation. Admiral Hayes stood at the front, presenting the latest data. The images behind him showed the void's effects spreading through the solar system. "We no longer have the luxury of debate," Hayes said, his voice firm. "The void's approach is accelerating. We've lost contact with our outer system monitoring stations. The gravitational distortions are getting worse. We need to make a decision now." Professor Foster, who had mastered more of the Nautilus's systems than anyone except Anna, stepped forward. "The ship has shown us what happened to other worlds that tried to stand and fight. None survived. The builders left us the Nautilus for a reason. They knew this was the only way." On the screens, new data streamed in. The void's effects had reached Saturn, its rings beginning to distort and break apart. The sight silenced many of the doubters in the room. This was no longer a theoretical threat. It was visible to anyone with a telescope. "The Nautilus has begun its final transformation," Anna announced, bringing up images from the ocean facility. The massive ship was changing, its true form emerging as it prepared for its purpose. When complete, it can carry 10 million people in its primary hull. The secondary systems can hold another 30 million in suspended animation. We can save 40 million people, maybe more. The room erupted in argument. 40 million out of billions. How would they choose? Who would go? Who would stay? Miller raised his hand for silence. "The Nautilus isn't just offering escape," he said. "It's offering us a chance to preserve Earth's legacy. The ship's data cores can store the sum of human knowledge, Earth's biosphere, even genetic samples of every species we can save. We can take our world with us." A new alert blared through the station. On the screens, they watched as Mars's smaller moon, Phobos, began to break apart under the void's growing influence. The red planet's surface was already showing signs of massive gravitational stress. "We don't have weeks to debate this anymore," Hayes said. "We barely have days. Every hour we wait puts the evacuation at greater risk. We need to decide. Now." The room fell silent as the reality of their situation sank in. Through the station's windows, they could see the aurora growing stronger, spreading further from the poles. The void's touch was reaching them, pressing against their world like dark fingers stretching across space. The time for discussion was over. Now they faced the hardest choice humanity had ever known: stay and face extinction, or leave their home behind and sail into an unknown future among the stars. The world watched in awe as the Nautilus finally revealed its true form. Rising from the ocean depths, the ancient vessel transformed into something that dwarfed humanity's greatest achievements. Its hull stretched nearly 10 miles long, its surface rippling with energy patterns that seemed to bend the light around it. The ship that had once fit in the Mariana Trench now floated majestically above the Pacific Ocean, its shadow touching 3 continents. Miller stood on the main bridge with Anna and Captain Foster, watching as the first waves of evacuees arrived through the massive transport tubes. The ship had created them, extending its technology across the globe to allow for rapid transportation of people and resources. Every minute counted now. "Status report," Foster called out, his voice steady despite the chaos of activity around them. "Primary habitation zones at 30% capacity," Anna responded, her hands moving across the control interfaces. "Life support systems functioning at optimal levels. The ship is adapting its internal space as more people arrive, creating exactly what we need." Through the bridge's viewing screens, they could see the effect the void was having on their world. The strange auroras now covered most of the sky, and weather patterns were becoming increasingly erratic. Earthquakes had become commonplace as gravitational forces pulled at the planet's core. "Update from the seed vault transfer," Miller said, checking his displays. 90% of Earth's collected genetic samples are now safely stored. The biosphere preservation chambers are operating perfectly. He paused, watching as another massive crowd of people was guided into one of the ship's many entrances. "The agricultural zones are ready. We'll be able to grow food during the journey." The Nautilus had transformed itself into a world in miniature. Its impossible interior spaces held entire cities, farms, and wilderness areas. The builders had designed it to preserve not just people, but the essence of an entire planet. A sudden alert drew their attention. The void's effects were accelerating faster than predicted. On the screens, they watched as Venus's atmosphere began to tear away, the planet's surface cracking under immense gravitational stress. "We need to speed up the evacuation," Foster ordered. "How many are aboard now?" "Just past 20 million, Anna reported. "The suspended animation chambers are working faster than expected. We can process about 100,000 people per hour." Miller moved to another console as new data streamed in. The selection process had been brutal but necessary. Every nation had been allocated spaces based on population, with priority given to those whose skills would be essential for humanity's survival. Scientists, doctors, engineers, farmers, along with a carefully chosen cross-section of human culture and knowledge. "Message from Admiral Hayes," a communications officer called out. "The last military vessels are pulling back from Mars orbit. The planet's crust is beginning to break apart." The bridge crew watched in horror as the red planet started to crack, its surface split by massive fissures of light. The void's gravitational forces were tearing it apart like paper. Earth would face the same fate if they stayed too long. "Time estimate?" Foster asked, his face grim. "At the current rate of planetary deterioration, we have maximum 48 hours before Earth's core becomes unstable," Anna answered. "We need to be clear of the solar system before then." The evacuation continued through the night, the Nautilus's systems working tirelessly to process the arriving crowds. Miller watched as families were guided to their new homes within the ship, their faces a mixture of fear and wonder at the incredible spaces the vessel had created. In the ship's vast data cores, the sum of human knowledge was being stored and cataloged. Libraries, museums, art collections, humanity's greatest achievements preserved for the future. The Nautilus was becoming more than just a ship. It was becoming the ark of Earth's legacy. 35 million aboard, Anna announced as dawn broke over the Pacific. The final transport tubes are operating at maximum capacity. The sky had turned a deep purple, and the moon's orbit had visibly shifted. Time was running out. On the screens, they could see the last groups of evacuees rushing toward the transport points. Everyone knew they couldn't save everyone. The weight of those left behind would haunt them forever. "Prepare for departure sequence," Foster ordered, his voice echoing through the ship's communication systems. "All sections, report readiness status." The Nautilus hummed with power as its ancient engines awakened fully for the first time in 50,000 years. Humanity's greatest journey was about to begin, even as their home world crumbled behind them. The final countdown began as Earth's magnetic field started to collapse. The Nautilus hovered above the Pacific, its massive form casting shadows over the waves below. Inside the bridge, Miller watched the last transport tubes retract into the ship's hull. They had managed to save 38 million people, along with samples of nearly every living species on Earth. "All sections report ready," Captain Foster announced, his voice carrying through the ship's communication system. "Final hull integrity check complete. Engine systems at full power." Anna stood at the main control interface, her fingers dancing across the holographic displays as she coordinated with the ship's eye. The void's influence had reached the inner solar system, and Earth's moon was already showing signs of structural stress. They had pushed the evacuation to the absolute limit of safety. "Beginning departure sequence," she called out. The ship hummed deeper, the sound vibrating through their bones. "Dimensional drives engaging. Everyone, prepare for transition." Through the bridge's viewing screens, they watched their world one last time. The strange auroras had spread across the entire planet now, painting the atmosphere in sheets of purple and green. Massive storms covered much of the surface, and earthquakes had begun to reshape continents. "Navigation plotted," Foster said. "Course laid in for the builder network coordinates." He turned to Miller. "It's time." Miller nodded, stepping forward to activate the ship-wide communication system. His voice would reach every corner of the massive vessel, speaking to all the survivors of Earth. "This is Dr. James Miller. We are about to begin our journey. What we're about to experience. No human has ever done this before. The Nautilus will protect us, guide us, but we're heading into unknown space, towards a future we can barely imagine. Hold on to hope. We carry Earth with us." The ship's engines pulsed, and the view outside began to change. The fabric of space itself seemed to bend around them, creating patterns of light that human eyes had never seen before. The Nautilus wasn't just lifting off. It was folding reality, preparing to step through dimensions that normal space never touched. "Dimensional transition in 10 seconds, Anna announced. On the screens, they could see the void's effects reaching towards them, dark tendrils of gravitational force that threatened to tear their ship apart if they stayed too long. 5 seconds. The bridge crew watched as their instruments showed space-time bending around the ship's hull. The Nautilus' power was beyond anything humanity had dreamed possible, yet they were only beginning to understand its true capabilities. Transition now. Reality shifted. The familiar view of Earth and stars vanished, replaced by something else. They were moving through a space that shouldn't exist, a realm between dimensions where the normal rules of physics held no meaning. Through the viewing screens, they saw impossible colors and patterns that their minds struggled to comprehend. "All systems functioning normally," Foster reported, his voice steady despite the incredible scene before them. "The ship is performing exactly as the builders designed. We're on course." The journey through dimensional space lasted only minutes, though it felt like hours to those watching. When they emerged, the view took everyone's breath away. A new star field spread out before them, completely different from the one they had known. In the distance, they could see structures, massive space stations and artificial worlds that spoke of civilizations far beyond their own. "We're receiving signals," Anna said, her voice filled with wonder. "Multiple sources. The builders weren't lying. There are others out there, waiting for us." As if in response, the ship's systems displayed new information, revealing more about their destination and the network of civilizations they were about to join. The Nautilus had not just saved them. It had brought them home to a larger family among the stars. Miller looked at the screens showing the interior of the ship, where millions of humans were starting their new lives in the carefully created habitation zones. They had left Earth behind, but they carried its legacy with them, its life, its knowledge, its spirit of exploration and survival. "Begin first contact protocols," Foster ordered. "Let's introduce ourselves to our new neighbors." As the Nautilus moved forward into this new realm of space, its passengers began to understand that this wasn't just an end, it was a beginning. Humanity had taken its first real step into the cosmic ocean, carrying with them the dreams, hopes, and determination that had always driven them to explore beyond the next horizon. The ship that had waited so long in Earth's deepest trench had fulfilled its purpose, transforming a planetary civilization into a spacefaring one. Now, beyond all imagination, humanity's greatest adventure was about to begin.